Hey everybody, welcome back to Plum Figgy. Alright, so now we are at the stage of getting our signatures to be ready to be put into our book. I'm going to do a hollow back binding on this, and I apologize in advance. I can't show you literally every step because this again is something that I learned from the Nick the Booksmith course, but I do know that pretty much everything that not pretty much, everything that I'm going to show you is easily available as tutorials on YouTube, other YouTube channels. And so, yeah, so just going to put that out there. Also, since the last time we were working in here, I went ahead and added some messy stitching along the spine here. I looked at different thinner laces and things, ribbons, and honestly nothing really was kind of standing out to me that I wanted to use. The main reason I wanted to put something here was because the fabric, actually, I didn't cut it straight, and it's like literally right in the middle where you would see. And so I needed to do something that would kind of disguise that in a way. And so this is just some kind of chicken scratch messy stitching that I did with some hemp twine on both the front and the back. Pretty easy. I'll just kind of walk you through how I did it. So I just pretty much, with my pokey tool, made holes in one row at random places, and then I moved over about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch maybe, and made holes in another row also just randomly. And so I just started with my thread so that my knot was on the outside, because we're going to need to glue our books or our signatures in here, so I couldn't have a knot sticking out on the inside. So just started there, and I just kind of went up and down with my needle through those holes. And then when I wanted to, so I went up and back, and I was back at this point, and so I knew I wanted 3 rows and it needed to be a little bit messier. So I just then poked holes where I felt like I wanted my thread to go, and I just worked my way back up to the top and ended it with another knot at the top. So we have a knot here and a knot there on both the front and the back. So that's how I did that. Nothing too fancy or special. I could have done the cross stitch, which would have been cute too, but I felt like with this cover, it just needed to be messy, and the lace was just too nice and pretty. So it just wasn't working. And I didn't really want to cover either the fabric or this gold embossed design up. So, or inlay, I guess. So that's what I did. Okay, so now for our signatures, what we're going to need to do is create a template, and this is like literally probably the most boring part of the entire process, but it's, you know, a necessary thing. And so what I'm gonna do is I need to make this is just a file folder that I'd used the other part of it, and so this is just leftover pieces of that. And so I just need one of these. Actually, let me just rip this off. Okay, so I just need one of these, and we just need to make sure that the height is the same height as our covers, which is 7 5/8 inches, and then just shy of the width. And I could measure that, but to be honest with you, I don't want to. So here you can see my cover goes to about there. I could scooch this over just a little bit more, but and then here, let me pull this up just a little bit. So then I'm just going to make myself a mark over here, and that's going to be our width that we'll work with. So now I just need to get my paper trimmer out, and I'm going to cut at that mark for my width, and I'll save this other piece for another spine. I have another one that I need to do anyway. And I still have my mark from the other day when we were working on this before. So I'll just make my height mark. And there is, you know, in file folders at the spine, they have those grooves so that it will fold easily or bend easily. So there is one of those left here, which doesn't bother me really. It's fine. So, okay, at this point, if you're using a file folder or kind of cardstock that is designed and maybe has white on one side, pretty much my goal here is I want the white, the lightest part, to be coming in like this, because we're going to be covering this with fabric, but sometimes the fabric that you choose may not necessarily cover everything that might be on the design of your cardstock or file folder or whatever you're using for this. So that is just kind of a general tip that I tend to stick to. So at this point now, I need to locate myself a nice piece of fabric to use. I'm actually not going to use the same pink fabric that we use for the spine because it's just a little bit too thick. I do have this nice piece of fabric here. I hope it's tall enough. This might actually be perfect. I really love this, yeah, natural muslin. This will be perfect. So let me pull this out. It just goes with everything. It's nice solid weight. It's not too thick. It's not too thin. Hides a lot of things, like, you know, if I did have a pattern on this, it would hide that pretty well. Okay, I am going to spray this with just a touch of water to get rid of this wrinkle a little bit. Gluing it onto the cardstock will help that, but if I can kind of ease it out a little bit too, that will be good. So okay, now, pretty simple. All I'm going to do is I need to have, probably an inch or so on either side. So this is pretty well lined up on this side with this line on my mat. So I'm gonna, and this doesn't have to be exact, I just want to make sure that there's enough fabric on either side of the spine to really hold it in and make sure it's secure. And then if you want to add end papers, I don't think I will, because I kind of like the color and feel of the paper that's already in there for the end papers. So actually, having said that, I might rearrange my first page. I might find a different page. Let's just do that anyway. There we go. That'll look good. Okay. Yeah, because that other blue wasn't going to look very good next to the green. And then this one will look okay. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad either. So, all right. Done and done. Okay, so we've got our width, right? So now I'm going to turn it onto its side so I can easily trim for the height. And we want the height to be the exact same height as our piece of cardstock or file folder or whatever it is that you're going to use. So, you know, it doesn't need to be exact, but it needs to be the same height. And I'm going to go ahead and rip that as well. And now we've got a bit of extra that we can use somewhere else. And I'm just going to take some of these extra pieces and clean it up a little bit. Okay, so this is the side that I want to face in, and so this is the side that I want to glue my fabric to. Okay, and so just like in the last video, I'm going to figure out how I want my fabric to sit on top of the thing that I'm going to glue it to. Pull it up just a little bit, and then I'm actually going to stick my scissors here so that it doesn't move around, and I'm going to put my glue down. So now this is the kind of thing where this fabric will show the Fabri-Tac through to the front side if I don't use my finger and smooth it down. So I will need to use my finger and kind of smooth out the glue. So we don't want the patches of glue to show through. So I'm slightly moving it around. There we go. Very nice. And so we'll just let that, just rub that in just a little bit. And now we can do our bottom half. You don't need tons and tons. It's not going to go anywhere. And you know, you are going to be sewing your signatures into this as well. So you'll be adding, you know, string and sewing, essentially hand sewing to this. So just need to make sure it'll stay in place and not get all funky or weird or anything like that. Okay, so now at this point on the back side where we're not going to be able to see anything, we need to now make ourselves a grid, a pattern essentially of where we want our signatures to go. So let's see, I need to double check again because I've been working on other journals. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signatures, so I don't forget. So now this is where a centering ruler comes in super handy because, like, if you remember, I didn't take the time to necessarily measure exactly, you know, where measure this so that it, you know, this actually is hitting right in the middle of 2 16ths marks. So at this point now, I just need to, okay, so I have 5 signatures. So that means one of my signatures is going to be on the very middle line. And then I'll have 2 more on either side of that line, evenly spaced, using my ruler. So, you know, when I first started doing these journals, I spent forever trying to figure out the math and make sure that everything was exactly perfect and evenly spaced. And yes, to a degree you should do that, but at the same time, these are handmade things. If I have a little bit of extra more space over here between where my signatures start, or maybe I have a 1/4 of an inch from the edge of my template to where my first and last signature are, but there's a slightly bigger gap between the first signature and the second signature, that's fine. At this point, I'm just going to use my grid lines in my ruler, mark out 5 different lines, and move on with my life, to be completely honest. I do try to keep about a 1/4 of an inch in between, but in this case I think I have a little bit of extra room, so I'm going to go just beyond that. And so we're going to do our first signature there, and then our second, or this is our second signature, and then this is our first. So as you can see, maybe you can't Maybe I need to scroll down. Oh, that was that was not the right way. Zoom. Here we go. Okay. And let me move this up just a little bit so you can see. Okay, so now you can see. So in the middle of my ruler, I don't know how well you can see it, but my paper ends here, and you see my grid lines are on either side of that. So that's where I'm saying I've got it centered. So I marked my middle signature here, and then the other signature on either side, I'm going to go 1/4 plus whatever distance this is, and maybe a millimeter. I don't know. And then for the last signature, I'm going to go over here. So we have slightly different widths in between each of these, and that's okay. Like this width right here between the beginning and the first signature is a little bit wider than this width. And then this width I think is about the same as the first width is. So that's why I'm saying don't stress yourself out so much about that. It's okay to not be absolutely perfect in your spacing. Just make sure that the spacing is going to work for the number of signatures that you're using in your journal. Okay, so now I'm recentering this again. Actually, it will help me to center my center line. On my grid, which you can't see the top, unfortunately, but okay, so looks like this side's just a little bit thinner, which that happens too, and it's not the end of the world if it does. Pull this up just a little bit. Sorry, I feel like an allergy attack is gonna hit me again. Okay, so now I'm literally just marking the same marks that I had the first time. And there we go. Okay, so now you can see I've got marks on both sides. And now at this point, it's just a matter of connecting the dots and drawing a line. Typically, I don't do it horizontally like this, but for your guys' benefit, I'll do it this time. And if I don't hit at each side exactly perfect, again, I'm not going to stress too much about it. At the end of the day, it'll be fine. So, okay. Oops. All right, so we've got some lines now. At this point, I'm gonna bring my grubby mat back out because I do kind of really need the grid lines on this one to help me. So we're going to find our center again, but this time we're going to find the center from the height and the top and bottom. So let me locate that. And of course, these Reader's Digest journals, they're a little tricky to work with because they don't land on a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or anything like that. So all right, so my center is about here. Okay, and I'm actually going to go on both sides now. Because I'm doing a hidden spine, I need an even number of holes vertically to sew my signatures in. If I was sewing my signatures directly into my spine, I would need an odd number of holes. Okay, so the easiest, if you're sewing directly into your spine, the easiest and quickest way would be to do 3 holes. You would have your middle hole and then a hole on either side, probably about an inch or so from the top and bottom. I tend to use 5 holes all the time just because I think it's a little more sturdy and secure. But because we're not going to be sewing, because we're doing a hidden spine, I'm going to be sewing it in differently than I would normally if it was into the actual spine. So, okay, let me explain. So if you're sewing directly into a spine, you're going to be cutting off a different piece of thread or cord or whatever it is that you're using to sew your signatures in for each signature that you have. And so you would then make your knot either on the inside of the signature or on the outside of the spine, however you've decided to do it. Typically it's on the inside of the signature. And so you'll have a different piece of thread for each signature. You'll start in the middle. Well, this is how I do it. Start in the middle. If you had 3, go down to the bottom one, come back in, go all the way up to the top one, out to the back side, and then back in through the middle on the other side of your thread that's going vertical. And then you would tie your knot. Now, because I'm doing a hidden spine, I'm going to do all my sewing directly onto this piece of cardstock, file folder, whatever it is that you're going to use. And so really you're never going to see, so I'm only going to use one longer piece of thread for the entire thing, a cord, whatever it is that you're using. And I'll have my knots hidden on my grid here at the front and then the back of where I sew. And so because of that, you don't need to have an odd number. It just works out. You need to have an even number of holes. I hope that made sense. It was a lot of explaining, a lot of hand gesturing, and I'm so sorry about that. I talk with my hands. I can't help it. It's just a thing. Okay. So now, having explained all that, let me go back to my ruler and get myself centered again. And so I need to make, instead of 5 holes, I'll make either 4 or 6 holes. I think for this one, 4 holes will be plenty because this journal isn't super tall. If it was like a 8.5 or 9 inch tall book, I would definitely want to have 6 holes or 5 holes if I was sewing directly into the spine. So, okay, so we have our middle. I'm actually not going to use this for our holes, but it's helping me to know where my holes should be placed. I think I want one, let's see, this is just about an inch from the top, so we'll do one here, and then 2 inches down from that again, and then 2 more inches down, and then, whoops, I keep moving my ruler. Make sure that the bottom one is the same distance from the that you chose for the top. So I've made my marks, and now I'm going to just connect the dots again with my ruler. So actually I didn't need my pink grid. I'm looking through the ruler to line it up this way, so I was off a little bit on that one. Yeah, usually I would do this part before I glue my fabric, but it's fine because I would then use my grid line to help me make sure everything's lined up perfectly and perfectly straight. So, okay, we'll just go with this and hope that it works well. I'm trying to not get pen marks on my fabric if at all possible. Okay, so we've got our lines now, and at every intersection, that's where we're going to make a hole. And for me, I find it a whole lot easier to make a hole if I kind of make a bullseye. So I will just go and circle each intersection, and it's just easier and quicker for me to do it this way. You may not have to do that, but it just helps my eye kind of narrow down to what my target is, I guess. So there's that. But before we start poking holes, I need to make a template that's going to go into the signature for us to poke the holes through the signature. So here is just some scratch paper that I just kind of hang on to. And so I'll use this side. So I'm just going to fold this in half. Again, this doesn't have to be the exact height. As you can see, it's not the exact height as my template, and that's okay. If you're just starting out, you may want to do it that way, or actually make it the exact height of your signatures, because your signatures should be just slightly shorter than your spine. Like here you can see there's just about 1/8 of an inch on either side. Oh, well, look at that. It's just about perfect. I actually prefer it to be just slightly smaller. I'm going to shave off just a little bit, because when it's not, then when you're sewing and poking your holes, these edges get all grubby because you're holding on to, and bent and funky because you're holding on to, well, at least that's the way I do it, which you'll see in just a minute. So, okay, so I've got this folded in half. Now I'm just going to lay this on one of my, oh, I need to make sure that this is evenly spaced. Okay, so we're going to eyeball this one. Okay, so I'm going to say that it's the same distance over here as it is over here, so it's centered. So I'm just going to make a mark where each of the holes will need to be. Like so. And then I just open this back up, because now I want this to be on the inside. But to kind of help me again, I'm going to extend that line and then circle it. You don't have to do it this way. It's just, it helps me. And even if you wanted to even go like this, that would also be another big help. Just make a plus sign or something. But sometimes it gets a little shadowy when you're working, and it's just easier to see it this way, I think. So, okay. All right, so we have our template. Now, the other thing I need to make sure and do is mark what is top on both of these. So I'm going to designate this as the top, and then this is top up here. Because when you're sewing in your signatures, you're going to want to make sure you always have this one matching up with this one. Just trust me. Even though we've done all these calculations and measurements, for whatever reason, it's always not quite right. And I don't know how that happens, but it just does. Okay, so now at this point, to help me, I kind of just poke in the middle of my holes to get it started. And I do that because the way that I poke my holes through my template and in my other one is I hold it and I just let kind of the weight of my pokey tool go through on this. I mean, this is just thin paper here. But by poking it first, I'm not moving my pokey tool around trying to find the middle. I know exactly where the middle is because it's already kind of started. So just kind of like drilling a pilot hole, I guess. And so I'll do the same thing here. I'll just go through and poke in the middle of each of these first, and I'll fast forward through this. Okay, so here's our back side. Now, as you can see, we can see our holes. Hopefully you can see. We see our holes on the front side. And at this point now, I'm going to go find my string, which is right here. This is, I think, for crocheting. I'm not sure, but it's a nice strong, I think, nylon string. People will tell you to measure based on the height of the spine. To be honest with you, I don't bother with that. I kind of guesstimate. I'm going to say that this is about right. If I run out of string, I can easily, in this case, tie it off and, you know, start again. So that's what I do. I don't have time to worry about that kind of stuff. I mean, I've spent a lot of time already setting this up, and that's good enough for me. So I go rogue sometimes. So here are my 3 favorite needles. This one is my favorite for sewing in signatures. This one I think it came from an embroidery kit, cheap embroidery kit. So this is not a sharp on the end, but the eye is somewhat wide, but also not super wide. So it allows for me to use kind of a thicker thread like this instead of having to rely on embroidery thread, because I don't know that embroidery thread would necessarily last as long. I guess if you waxed it, it would, obviously, and I could wax this as well, but I just don't feel like I really need to. So here's how I got glue all over my thing. Sorry, that's just so gross. Let me get rid of that. Okay, here's how I thread a needle. This is just the way I've done it my entire life. If it helps you, great. If not, do it the way you do it. But I just put the thread in between my thumb and my finger, and I actually pull it down so that you don't really see it. And then I put my needle right there. And with this needle, the widest part is like right in the middle. And so I just kind of guide it through the needle. Honestly, I really tend to get it the very first time. I don't do the whole thing where you're holding the needle with your left hand and trying to fit it in that way. No. No, don't do it that way. It'll take you forever. You're gonna get mad. You're gonna cross your eye. You don't need to do that. Trust me, try it this way a few times. You'll kind of get that feel of it, and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I can thread a needle. So yeah, I don't even know where I picked that up, if I just started doing it that way or if I saw someone, but that's how I do it. And so then on the other end, I'm just gonna make a knot, and I'm gonna do three, just because I want to make sure. Oh, I didn't give myself very much extra room. Let me do that one again. I don't think that last one really held. Sorry, my fingers are full of glue at the moment, so they look really dry and gross, but it's just glue. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a knot. I don't want it to come back through the other end. And so at this point, I have my thread, and I always like to get my needle threaded before I start poking holes in my signatures, because I've found that because of the way that I sew in my signatures, a lot of people will use a phone book or, you know, that kind of thing. I don't. I like to just hold on to it with my left hand, and let's see, find my middle. I just like to hold on to it with my left hand and just kind of keep a hold on to it, really. And I'm centering my whatever this thing is called. And on the back side here, you can see this is how I'm holding it with my 2 fingers on either side of the signature, and I've got my thumb in the middle, and I'm pushing this down and making sure that my pages are as far back as possible. And so this is essentially what you would be doing with a phone book if you were doing it that way. And so I just make sure and so I'm finding my first hole, and I just make sure my fingers are out of the way. And as I move my hand, I'm keeping my pokey tool in the hole because that's going to keep everything secure. And move my hand back. This one's a little bit more tricky because it's right at the top, but putting my thing in and using the spine of my papers to help keep things secure. Moving my hand back over. I've got a nice secure grip. At this point, I might actually turn it around. Now I have to remember, this is my top. See how nice that is that we did that? And I'm going to do the same thing on the other 2. Put my pokey tool through and do the last one. Okay, so we've got that. Very carefully pull this out, and I'm going to put my pokey tool back in and kind of keep everything nice and secure until I'm ready to actually sew in my signature. Okay, so now for this, we're going to start on the back side. We want our knot to be on the back side and not on the side that you can see from the inside of the book. And this is my first signature, and even though it seems backwards, you got to remember this is the back side, so it's going to be sitting like this. So our first signature is this row here, which would be this row. So I'm going to put my needle in this bottom one. I like to start on the bottom. Notice if you were sewing directly into a spine, you would start in the middle, but in this way I'm starting at the top or the bottom, not in the middle. And we're just going to go weave in and out with our, talking with my hands way too much. Weave in and out our needle into our holes through our signature. It's simple as that. So at this point, I'm just going to set this down, pick up my signature again. I'm double checking that it's right side up. And I'm done with this now. And this first one's usually a little tricky, but I'm going to hold on to it, find my first hole, and it doesn't have to be super tight to your cardstock and fabric at first. Just getting the needle and thread through your holes at this point is the most important thing, and you can go back and tighten it. So, okay, I came up here. I'm going to put my needle back down through the next hole and find that hole on my cardstock, and there it is. And I'm going to now pull through both of those. Okay, tightening it as I go. Put my whole needle through that one, and then find this third hole and come up. Oops. Okay, pulling it a little tight, finding the last hole on the top, and then through the last hole in your cardstock, and pulling this tight. Okay, now at this point, we've threaded our thread through our signature, so we can let that sit now. I'm going to just tug just a little gently, make sure that my thread is nice and tight, and I'm going to add a knot here just to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. And it's going to help when we need to leave this now for a minute and add and poke our holes in our next signature. And this is another thing. I know some people like to poke all their holes in their signatures all at one time, and then they're ready to be sewn in. I actually don't like to do it that way, and you know, if that's the way you like to do it, that's great. You find whatever way is easiest for you and do that. For me, I tend to prefer to do them, poke the holes at the time when I'm ready to sew them in, because of the way I do it. How do I explain it? So, because it's too easy for your papers to shift around, the more times you pick up and put down your signatures. And so I've just learned that if I just can keep a hold on to my signature while I'm ready to use it, then it's just easier for me to do it that way. Okay, so I've got I've knotted this 3 times. Don't cut this off, or I mean, you could if you wanted to, but you don't need to, because the next time we go to sew, we're going to sew directly into this next hole over here, so there's really no reason to. Cutting it off, you're just going to have to knot it again. So, okay, so at this point, I've found I actually prefer to start my first signature this direction, okay? So my first signature is like this. Now for all the other ones, I've found that it's easiest for my signatures. I let gravity help me. And so I flip them the other direction. Now my top was over here, my top is over here now, and so that's like some mental gymnastics I have to do for when I'm poking holes in my signatures. But I just have found that it's easier to manage everything when you have your sewn in signatures sitting this direction. Okay, so here's my next signature. I'm going to find the center page again. My top for my signature is this direction, so I'm going to put my see what I mean? My template in this way, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Poke my holes. I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 of them in this direction. I think this shifted just a little bit. So, yep, it did. Let me get that back to center. All right, so top is this way, which means I have to move everything the other direction, because top here is this direction, right? So top, make sure it's like that. Just double check, it doesn't hurt. Okay, so now I'm going to take my needle, poke it through my cardstock and then through the top hole. And pull that kind of tight, and then go to the next hole. Find my next hole in my back plate. I don't know what to call this thing. All my other stuff is getting in the way. Notice I've got everything secured. I'm not letting my pages flop around. I'm keeping everything pretty nice and tight with my fingers. If you don't do that, you're going to find it's really hard to get your needle to come up through the hole and get through all your pages without having to poke extra holes or just, find your hole. Trust me, I've been through that too many times to tell you. It's just easier to do it this way. I don't know what else to tell you, but that for me, that's the way it's working. So, okay. So just did that, and now we can let our signature rest there, and we're gonna just do the exact same thing again, where kind of pull and tug just a little bit, make sure our string is nice and tight, and add another knot down here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep doing this. Probably put you on fast forward if you really wanted to watch this. I suppose you could put my video on slow motion, or just rewind as many times as you need the instruction until you kind of get it into your fingers and into your head. So. Okay guys, so here is a look at the back side of my cardstock file folder, whatever you want to call it. And here's a look at the front. So when you open and you have your space in between your signatures, it's nicely evenly spaced. Things are nicely and solidly in here. And so at this point, I'm going to do a little bit of stuff to this back side that I unfortunately can't show you. But when we come back, we'll be ready to then glue our whole paper block into our book, our spine, or our cover, whatever it's called. I'll be right back. Okay everybody, so I've got my book block ready to glue into my book. So here we come back with our book. We missed you, little book. So now it's time to get this all glued in. And what I'm going to do now is do my absolute best to center my book block in my spine, both horizontally and vertically. And once I feel like I've got it pretty well sitting in there, now I'm going to be very careful not to let it move around. One thing I don't like though is my spine, for whatever reason, has decided to stop being rounded. So I need to kind of train it to go back to being rounded. I don't know if it's gonna, might be a little too thick. Okay. Okay, so starting this again, I've got these, I think it's pretty well spaced. So I'm now holding the front cover and the rest of the book block with my left hand, and with my right hand I'm going to glue this side fabric flap down to our back cover. So this is nothing that you can't find on any other. Most junk journalers that have been around a while have some kind of tutorial on how to do this, so I'm not sharing anything that's rocket science at this point. But okay, so I'm pull this fabric over, and to be honest with you, I didn't do a super fantastic job of this. It's just a little thicker than I wish it was, but that's okay. It adds to the charm. So at this point, I'm just really pushing down. Notice that I didn't put any glue in the crack or behind my book block. It's only on this piece that's attached to the back cover. Okay, and then I want to pick this up and kind of smooth out any bubbles that might be happening with the glue, and just kind of train it again to do what I want it to do while the book is closed. Okay, so now at this point I'm going to transfer my grip to this other side, and we're going to do the exact same thing over here. So I don't need to worry about smoothing the glue where I've got my paper, but gluing on this fabric, it will show through, so I will kind of smooth that out. Okay, so we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to pull this, just ease this down, and I'm going to glue it. And it's good that we put other fabric in the spine, because then this Fabri-Tac is really going to adhere to that other fabric, and then this fabric that we're working with here. So it'll work in our favor for sure. Okay, so, and I got a little bit wide with that, which is fine. I can go ahead and fix that later when we're decorating. But the most important thing right now is just to make sure that this is solid and not going to go anywhere. And yeah, do you see that? We've got kind of a little bubble kind of thing happening there. And so now I'm just going to pick this up, and I'm going to let it sit like this and dry. And in the meantime, actually, I can hold it, and I want to fringe up my fringe here, make it look a little more distressed and old. Because I like having these little fringes. I think it's fun. This is just cheesecloth, or actually this is from Hobby Lobby. It's their version of cheesecloth. I think it's their store brand. And I like having the little flyers there too, fringes. So we'll do the same here. Just gonna cut through some of those. There's some that are sewn horizontally, so I'll just cut through those and manhandle it a little bit. It look old and frayed. At this point, it's not going to pull out, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, there we go. That looks good. All right, so get rid of my trash here. Okay, so I'm gonna, I did get some glue on the front. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna open this up and see how it's going. And at this point, if you need to add any more glue, now would be the time to do it. I think that little bubble is just happening because it didn't make a connection for some reason. I could go back and add some more glue under here, but it's not going anywhere, and I don't really want to do that. So depending on what you wanted to do with your front, inside, and back cover. Yeah, see, I don't know why this is lifting up here. This needs more glue. This one's being stubborn. It usually does not do this. Okay, well, I'm gonna let it sit like this for a minute and dry this away. So at this point, depending on the fabric that you used in your spine, if you want it, or your end paper situation, if you wanted to cover your fabric, this would be the time that you would do it. Typically what I do is I just measure using the existing end paper, and if you don't have that and you're starting from scratch, just measure the full height of your cover and subtract 1/4 of an inch from that. I'm sorry for those of you who don't use that measurement, but whatever the equivalent of that would be for you. I'm sorry, metric system, and I don't know that as well. And then the same for wherever you want your end paper to hit over here to the end of your book cover, and subtract 1/4 of an inch. And then laying that down, I always try and make sure that the distance is equal on the top, bottom, and here. Glue that down, and then you can cover all of this if this doesn't look very good. And to be honest with you, this doesn't look very good, so I may end up doing that myself. But let's just see how this front now looks. If it's cooperating, I think this one will be okay. So, but I used kind of thicker paper, so if I was going to do that, I would definitely put down cardstock, and I may, just because this just doesn't look super clean, and I've got extra extra fabric over here anyway. But all right, well, there we go. There's our junk journal. And so I don't want to manipulate this too much, but the reason I like to use the hollow back binding is because do you see how flat these papers are laying now? This will be a whole lot easier to work in going forward, and obviously as the more I add to it, the more difficult it will be, but there we go. So yep, and you'll notice I did add a few book pages here and there, so I think each signature now has 10 papers in it. I added 2 book pages to each one. So all right, well, there's a quick little flip through anyway. I'm really excited to start using this book, to be honest. It's going to be really fun. It's going to take a while to get through, but that's okay. So, all right, well, there we go. Let's take another look again here. Yeah, this is, I need to not mess around with this and just let this glue dry. I might be adding some cardstock. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So, all right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, and hopefully it helped you learning how to bind a junk journal. And so for the next time, I think we're gonna get to start playing in this journal. So until then, hope you are all very safe and stay healthy. And it's winter time, so it's always a little bit hard to stay happy all the time, but hopefully you can stay happy too. And I will see you all very soon. Bye.